Alright, audio muted.
Oh, I can't see my video. This chat thing popped up. Can you help? I turned off the camera.
Oh.
So my video was down here and I can't see it.
Okay.
It's that one right there.
Yeah, so we can.
How do I make it bigger? Oh, no, we're good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Hey, Angela. Hey, Marisa. Kathy Jones, how are you? Hey, Tammy. What are you drinking, Kathy? Is anyone joining from outside of California? Should probably be drinking more water than wine at this stage of the tasting. Seems like the responsible thing to do.
From Chicago.
Hey, Jim. I'm anxious to try your Rice Krispie treats. Thanks for coming out from Dallas, Sarah. Crystal's got the rosé. Hey, Lexi from Chicago. Well, fantastic. Let's get this show on the road. I'm really glad to be taking a break from everything we're doing here at Sanford for the day, and especially from my kids, who my wife is at home with, keeping an eye on. And glad to be sharing this tasting with you guys now, and just sort of enjoying a little pleasure, because I think we're all due for a little. If we haven't met before, my name is Trey Fletcher. I'm the winemaker at Sanford, and I'm the new winemaker at Sanford. So I've been here for about 8 months, and in that 8 months, I've really been amazed with not only the team and the family that I work for, but the vineyard as well that I inherited. Sanford was planted in 1971. It was the first Pinot Noir vineyard in Santa Barbara County, and I'm happy to say that we have about 20% of the vineyard that's still in production, still growing those old vines of Pinot Noir. My background is for better or for worse, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, growing in Santa Barbara County, in the Sonoma Coast, New Zealand, Argentina, and it's really been the avenue that opened up for me early on when I finished high school, that I just gravitated towards, and so I feel really honored to bring all of my experience and share the experience that the Terlato family and my whole team here at Sanford have, and really elevate the wines at Sanford and continue a legacy of making beautiful, elegant wines that are age-worthy and show the fabulous sites we have. Jim, I am at the winery. I'm here at Sanford in the Santa Rita Hills in Santa Barbara County, and it's a very, very windy day, which is pretty typical for us. We're just beginning to see some bud break. So,
George is with us.
So let's start out with a taste. I know several of you have the three wines that we sent out, the 2016 Viognier, which I have in my glass, which I have to admit to all of you, I generally do not enjoy Viognier that much. But this is the wine that I do enjoy because we are in such a cool area, and because it generally doesn't allow Viognier to get really heavy and really highly alcoholic. This Viognier is really beautiful. It comes from a small little 1.6 acre parcel that grows right up against the side of a hill next to our old vine Chardonnay. It's planted in Botella series soils, which are heavier red clay. But those soils, coupled with the really, really cold winds here at Sanford and Benedict, provide a very streamlined, very, very elegant, very racy Viognier. So this wine is really racy, really mineral, and really savory. So it really explodes with pineapple and tropical fruits. But it also it's very savory, and it actually makes me really thirsty for more. It's a natural for any sort of seafood, scallops, ceviche, crab. None of which I currently have in my pantry because we aren't buying that much fresh fish right now. But the stuff that I do have in my pantry that it works really well with is we have a lot of cheese, a lot of nuts. It goes really well with salads. And also, I find myself drinking Viognier by itself, which, can get me into trouble, but it's still a lot of fun. All right, your Belinda, you've got some Block 5 in the glass. Fantastic, good choice. What are you guys enjoying from your wines? Does anyone have the Viognier? Ooh, spicy Thai noodles would be delicious with that, Angela. Good call. I need to get your recipe. I'm a real Luddite when it comes to Thai food. So Viognier is the principal grape in Condrieu, Northern Rhone variety, and it's a really small part of the Northern Rhone. At Sanford, we principally focus on Pinot Noir and Chardonnay Burgundian varieties, but we get to play around with this small little parcel that we've had planted since the mid 90s. And so it's a real opportunity to kind of see what this site produces and the similarities that it has with our Chardonnay, but also the real differences that it has. It's generally a little richer and a little heavier than our Chardonnay can be, and we certainly don't use any new oak when we ferment the Viognier, but it's fermented all in barrel, all without malolactic fermentation, so we block that. And then we bottle it just like all of our Chardonnays after about 14 months in barrel. Cheers. That's good. Should we move on to the Loma Alta Pinot Noir? That's what I have in my glass. If you guys have a Pinot Noir, I see Karen's got the 4D, which is we're going to get to shortly. I love Pinot Noir. It's probably my Catholic upbringing. I like it because it not only beats me up, but occasionally you get these glimmers of absolute perfection throughout the whole process, whether we're growing it in the vineyard or watching it age in the cellar and enjoying it in the glass. And it's really hard to get Pinot Noir just right, but when you do, it's incredibly rewarding, and I love it because when you open up the bottle and that first glass of Pinot Noir that you have, it's so different from the last glass of Pinot Noir that comes from that bottle, and that constant evolution and that change for me is really exciting. Loma Alta is Spanish for the high hill. So this is planted way out on a bluff overlooking the San Ynez River. It was planted in 1997 to a selection of Pinot Noir 115, which is a good all-around, very very even-handed Pinot Noir that excels at making a lovely wine that shows the fantastic soils that are grown that we have in that block. The Loma Alta, it's one of those blocks that not every block of Pinot Noir or every vineyard of any grape for that matter is always in a beautiful spot when it makes a beautiful wine. That being said, when I was much younger, I always thought that if it was a great, fantastic site for growing grapes, it was always going to be beautiful. They aren't all that way. And I'm always surprised at just how classically beautiful the view is from this site, overlooking the whole of the Santa Rita Hills, and our good neighbors across the street, Wenslow Vineyard and Sea Smoke Vineyard. They have got a great view of us, and we have a great view of them from this block. The wine for the Pinot Noirs, it's unfortunately it's very unsexy, very boring winemaking in that we work very hard to not do too much to it. With careful, meticulous farming and very hands-on farming in the vineyard, it really allows us to take a step back in the cellar. And so with the Pinot Noirs, we usually start picking them at midnight, and we'll pick all the way until the sun comes up and it starts to warm up about 10 o'clock in the mornings. And we'll sort the Pinot Noir very carefully on the sorting table, and then let it rest in the tank until alcoholic fermentation kicks off, in usually a couple days. And then the wines ferment for 2 or 3 weeks. We run a hose from the bottom of the tank into the barrels. We fill up the barrels. The Pinot Noir sleeps in the barrels for about 16 months, all French oak, about a third of it new. And the wine sleeps for that time, for 2 winters, and then we bottle it, unfiltered and generally unfined. Tim Clark's got a good question about the different virtues of older versus newer plant materials vis-a-vis clones. Well, I can tell you that the Loma Alta comes from a clone or a selection of Pinot Noir that was from Burgundy, from a specific vineyard, and it's a clone that was brought over in the mid '90s. And what we do here is we tried to plant a little bit of everything, to not just capture a single clone in our wines, but to get the whole symphony. And so we've planted a large selection of Pinot Noir clones, as well as Chardonnay clones, that are either heritage selections, meaning selections of Pinot Noir that aren't technically a clone. They've been in the country for a long time. Some of those would be Mount Eden, Calera, and a handful of others, Palmard being one of them, Wente. I'm probably missing a couple. And then the clones have all these 3-digit numbers, which aren't very sexy names, but they help us keep track of them. I love Loma Alta. You can tell it comes from a cold and windy spot. It's got really bright acidity. It's very much a mixture of structure and charm, and with plenty of spice. I love this wine. It's always it's got a very loud voice, but it's not obnoxious, which I find a virtue for Pinot Noir. It's delicious. I should mention the soils. We put a bunch of pictures of the different soils and the vines from these different blocks up on our Facebook site. They should be, if you just scroll up, they should be up one from the intro to this live tasting, and you can see the soils at Loma Alta compared to the soils of where the Viognier is. The Viognier is in a very red soil. It's not tremendously gravelly. And Loma Alta has very big rocks, mostly shale. When we go on to the 4D Pinot Noir from Sanford and Benedict, you'll see a very big difference in the taste, the aroma, and the color of the wine. And a little bit of that has to do with the selection or the clone of Pinot Noir, but a lot of it has to do with the soil. And at the end of the day, when Pinot Noir is essentially an inferior grape. It's very susceptible to mold. It's very susceptible to wind, to heat, to hydric stress, and to uninteresting soils. And Pinot Noir, unless grown in a good site with very interesting soils, which I believe we have here at La Rinconada and Sanford and Benedict, usually yields an uninteresting wine. And I think if you can taste the Loma Alta and now the 4D next to each other, you can see that with very little difference in the winemaking approach in the cellar, that these two sites make a very dramatically different Pinot Noir. Let me see if we have any questions. What is your favorite Pinot Noir clone, and what barrels do you prefer for aging Pinot Noir in? Gosh, I don't know if I have a favorite Pinot Noir clone, but I have a handful that seem to work really well. And I think the site always trumps the clone, and so usually if you have a very good site, you aren't getting a lot of what the wine gives you from that clone. And I'm going to go back on what I just said when we taste the 4D, because that is one of the clones that's the exception to that rule. The barrels that we prefer, I'm a good American, and I would love to use American oak on all of our wines, but we don't use any, and it's not for any other reason that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir just don't work well with American oak. American oak can be very coconutty and very loud, very whiskey flavored, and so we use French oak exclusively on the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And the coopers that we use, there's a handful of small family coopers from France. And what we are doing, what we're constantly trying to do, is figure out which cooper and which oak works best with our Pinot Noirs from the different sites, from Sanford and Benedict and La Rinconada, not to overshadow or obscure the terroir that we have here, but just to complement purely in a supporting role. I mean, I love the taste of French oak as much as the next person, but we're not growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in a very cold, challenging environment to have it taste like French oak. We want it to taste like Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir from Sanford and Benedict and La Rinconada. Jim, I'm glad you love the 4D. I love this wine too. It's certainly, if the 4D was a person at a dinner party, it would not be the quiet one in the room. This was our youngest planting. It's planted in 2008 in very gravelly soils in the Gazos series, which is a gravelly clay loam. Beautiful soils and just a pleasure to work with. And the 4D is a selection of Pinot Noir called 943. And so the combination of those soils, a warmer spot in Sanford and Benedict compared to the Loma Alta that we just had, and the incredibly tiny berries that we get from 943 gives us a very dark, very brooding, and a very complex, but not complicated wine. I love this 4D.
Tim has a great question for you regarding what is the best Pinot Noir you've ever tasted.
Tim Clark, what is the best Pinot Noir you have ever tasted, and why? Man, that should be a softball, but God, I'm gonna have to think about that for a second. Boy, Tim, I'm gonna try and answer honestly here. I think the best Pinot Noir I ever had, and if we're gonna say so, was from a producer up in Sonoma, Literai. It was the Pinot Noir that really opened my eyes to California being able to make wines of elegance and terroir and substance. And it was a vineyard called the Winemaker that is a monopole for Literai, so they're the only ones that get it. And it was a 1995 1 acre, and when I had that, it was everything I wanted. It was beautiful. It was complex. It kept me coming back to the glass. It was ethereal. It was, the classic, you know, uh, iron fist in a velvet glove. It was all those cliches, and it was just so pleasurable and enjoyable. The best years to be drinking right now. Is the 17 a little too young? It's really hard for me to judge. I'm a winemaker, and I probably drink all wine too young because we taste primarily out of barrel, and so I really enjoy young wines. But I think the 17 is showing really well right now, and I think it's got a lot of pleasure to give. Certainly, we've been drinking a lot of the 14s, 15s, and 16s. We recently had a 2011, which was showing beautifully. And that's the goal. And that's one of the big attractions of why I'm here at Sanford, is that there's not too many vineyards in California that have old vines of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir with a track record to make age-worthy wines. And I think in a good vintage, if we're doing our job and letting the vineyard really show its potential, the wine should hopefully age for 10 to 15 years, and if we're lucky, longer. Some of my favorite foods that I like to have with Pinot Noir that are in my pantry now. I am a sucker for a roast chicken, and I know it's very simple, but a lot of us have very limited food options right now since we're not going out to the grocery store every day. And Jacques Pepin's roast chicken recipe, which you can find online super easy, is just masterful because I could never figure out how do I get the chicken skin just crispy and how do I not dry out the chicken. And boy, that's a natural for Pinot Noir every time. And of course, salmon is always a match made in heaven. But if you're looking at the Loma Alta, which has a little more acidity and it's a little more ethereal, it's a natural for salmon or chicken or lighter game. But the 4D that I have is much darker, much more brooding Pinot Noir, and that can stand up to beef and lamb and any other hearty dish that you can really throw at it.
We've got some good questions about the vineyards and which ones have the oldest Pinot Noir vines.
So the oldest Pinot Noir vines in Santa Barbara County are, I believe, just outside our window here at Sanford and Benedict, planted by Michael Benedict in 1971. And they're still going strong. They're very healthy. They aren't showing any signs of virus or decline. And they make a real beautiful, elegant wine that goes into the Founders. If you've ever had the Founders vines, that is made exclusively with our original planting, own-rooted Pinot Noir. And then we also have a Chardonnay that is made from that original planting as well from 1971. A question from Jim on how the soils at Sanford differ from other soils in Santa Rita Hills, which is an excellent question. Thanks for asking. Santa Rita Hills has, how does the Santa Rita Hills differ from Oregon and from the Sonoma coast? Our soils were not once forests, so we have very, very high pH soils. We don't have acidic soils that used to be a forest. And in that realm, so we have down here, we have a fantastic variety of soils just on this property here. And a unique thing about the soils at Sanford and Benedict and La Rinconada is there used to be a big mountain right at the back of our property. And that mountain about 10,000 years ago crumbled in a big landslide, a really violent event. And so within the Santa Rita Hills, we have that unique attribute. So within those soils, we have, Monterey shale. We have a lot of clays and loams that you don't find in the Santa Rita Hills anywhere else. We also have chert, silex, and of course, diatomaceous earth, the limestone that we have down here as well. Good question, Jim.
And that's another great question for us for beginner tasters and what people should be looking for.
Yeah, if you're a beginner taster, just like all of us were at some time, how do I go about it? It doesn't have to be complicated or unfun. I just try and enjoy the aromas, note the color, but not terribly important. What are some aromas that jump out to me? No one's ever wrong. My kids, when they smell the Viognier, they're 4 and 3. They think it smells like the pineapple gummy bear, and that's not something I would put on a tech sheet or describe to a wine writer. But yeah, it does kind of have a pineapple gummy bear character to it. But just finding those scents and those aromas in the wines that speak out to you, and being able to turn off your eyes and your ears and just focus on that really primordial sense of smell and kind of get lost into it. It's really fun. And then whenever I'm tasting, I just how I was taught in school. I studied enology and viticulture in school, so I actually was taught how to taste. I'm too slow to figure it out by myself, and so I just let the wine glide over my palate, and I usually think about the acidity, how bright it is, or how heavy it is, how little acidity is in there. And then I think about the texture of the wine a lot. Texture is very important to me. And I grew up in a construction household. My dad was a plumber, and we worked with tradesmen all the time. And so for me, I think about the tannin in a wine that you hear described often as sandpaper, and sort of the different grits of sandpaper that you find. A looser grit would be a rougher wine, and then a finer grit, like you would use to finish, sanding your tabletop or your chair, would be an elegant, much more finer textured wine. And then most importantly of all, do I like it? And perhaps that's the only question you need to ask is, does this bring pleasure to me, and do I enjoy it?
Maggie's asking what makes our Sanford wines age-worthy.
Yeah, that's Maggie. That's a great question. What makes the Sanford wines age-worthy? I think meticulous farming and having a good site. Those are two of the most important things. And us, with the desire of the team here and the Terlato family to make wines that age really well. There's a few things that you can do in the cellar. We could rack it more, or we could not leave it in oak as long. That would make it be a little more approachable early on. But we always try and walk that line of making a wine that's approachable and enjoyable, but also it's going to reward time. So I hope that answered your question. Ooh, Colin, Viognier with the Dungeness crab and Meyer lemon. You need to stock my pantry. Well done, sir. Hey, Lisa. Oh, I'm so glad that pairs perfectly with the Pinot Noir. I'm really happy that worked out.
Allison was asking what a characteristic is between the Santa Rita Hills and Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir.
Yeah, so I think comparing the Santa Rita Hills, Allison, to the Sonoma Coast is very interesting. I've been lucky enough to make wine from some of the best vineyards in the Sonoma Coast and as well in Santa Barbara County. Two similarities to Sonoma Coast and Santa Rita Hills is we're both east-west valleys. If you think of Napa Valley, it's a north-south valley, and so it takes a while for the sun to get up and to hit the vines in a north-south valley. But for us, we get the sun the second it rises. And we also, because we do run east-west, are completely open to the ocean. And although we're in Santa Barbara County, we're in the northern end. So we have the part of the Pacific Ocean that's very cold. And so when that sun rises in the eastern end of the valley, and that heat creates a vacuum, it pulls the cold air from the Pacific Ocean over us all day. And the big difference is Sonoma gets a little warmer during the day than we do. We generally don't break out of the high 70s and low 80s, whereas Sonoma can get into the high 80s and low 90s routinely. And also our nighttime lows aren't as cold as theirs. So there's not as much of a diurnal shift. So the temperature between the daytime high and the daytime low in Santa Rita Hills, it's much closer. It's a much narrower band, where in Sonoma it's much different. So what does that give you? Usually our wines have much more acidity. There's a much more savory character to our wines, and much more spice driven. I think up there they can get much more opulent fruit characters. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They make great wine on the Sonoma Coast just like we do in Santa Rita Hills.
If you have time, there's a question about sustainability and what we do to promote it when you're in the winery.
Yeah, so we had a question about sustainability. The whole vineyard at La Rinconada and Sanford and Benedict are both certified sustainably. And so what do we do? So we try and promote. We have large wildlife corridors on the property. We have our farming goes through a very, very rigorous process. So everything we're doing, whether it's under vine cultivation, instead of spraying Roundup, we implement almost exclusively mechanical weeding. That's what we feel is not only sustainable, but best for the vines, best for the soils, and best for our workers. We try and make sure that we're taking advantage of planting a cover crop in the wintertime, which right now we're just mowing down and working into the soil as a natural fertilizer. We try to encourage owl boxes and raptor boxes, and to not have so much of a monoculture on the property. What other questions do we have? Hey, Jessica. Good to see you on here. Well, I think we've just about covered it. And please let us know if you guys have any other wines of ours that you want to taste next time. We're looking forward to doing another one of these, I think April 16th, with my partner in crime, Laura Roach, associate winemaker extraordinaire. And we're going to be tasting some sparkling wines, or Brut Cuvée, and a few others. So if you guys have any suggestions, send them on our way. And also, I just want you to know that we wish all of you and all your families the very best, and to be safe and to be kind to each other, and stay well. Cheers.